Picture this. You've been studying English for years. You know the grammar rules inside and out, and you absolutely crush those vocabulary flashcards. But then you step into a real-life situation, someone asks you a completely normal question, and suddenly you freeze. Your mind goes blank and the words just will not come out. Well, in today's explainer, we're going to fix exactly that by breaking down the true anatomy of a real conversation.
So why exactly do we freeze up like that? Man, it is so frustrating, right? The truth is, most of us are just stuck in this super comfortable cycle of reading and listening. We take in tons of input, but we completely neglect the physical act of actually speaking out loud. We basically expect to perform perfectly in real time, without ever having practiced the physical mechanics of output. It's like trying to run a marathon just by watching videos of people running.
But here is the craziest part. 200. You might think you need thousands of obscure, fancy words to sound fluent or to have a deep, meaningful conversation. But you really don't. Real conversations between real people, even the incredibly important, life-changing ones, run on a surprisingly tiny vocabulary of just about 200 words.
To show you how this works, our explainer today is broken into 5 quick parts. 1. The fluency illusion. 2. Tricky pronunciations and meanings. 3. Easily confused word pairs. 4. The real conversation. And 5. How to shadow effectively.
Starting with part 1, the fluency illusion, and why reading really isn't speaking.
Okay, let's dive into this with a concept that I find completely liberating. You do not need a massive textbook-level vocabulary to express complex emotions. Think about it. You can tell someone you love them, explain why you made a really difficult choice, have a passionate argument, and then fix the relationship afterward, all using a tiny but completely mastered vocabulary. The big illusion here is thinking you need more words when what you actually need is absolute total mastery over the basic ones.
Which brings us to part 2, tricky pronunciations and meanings. These are the words literally hiding in plain sight.
All right, let's uncover a few silent traps. These are words where the spelling gives you absolutely zero warning about how they actually sound in real life. You've probably known these since your very first week of studying. Take honestly. That H is completely silent. If you pronounce it, you'll instantly sound unnatural. Sure just sounds like sure, one smooth syllable. Whole, no W sound whatsoever. Serious is a huge one. Learners love to squeeze this into 2 syllables, but native speakers stretch it out to 3. Serious. Slow it down a bit. And right and wrong both have a completely silent W.
Now, take the word fair. On its own, it usually means just or equal. But in everyday conversation, the phrase fair enough is an absolute game changer. It basically means, okay, you know what? That makes sense. I accept that. It is the perfect, polite way to just drop a subject or concede a point without getting into a disagreement. It really keeps the conversation flowing smoothly. Here's another really interesting one. Actually, most learners use it to mean in fact, which is totally correct. But here's the secret. Native speakers often tack it onto the very end of a sentence to express mild surprise at their own feelings. So if someone says, "That was hard to hear," actually, they aren't just emphasizing the point. They're basically saying, "Wow, I did not quite expect that to affect me as much as it did." It's a subtle but absolutely brilliant conversational nuance.
Let's move on to part 3, easily confused word pairs. The classic advanced learner traps.
This perfectly illustrates one of the strictest rules you need to remember. Say versus tell. Say is just the physical act of speaking. She said it was fine works perfectly. But tell, it always requires a person to receive the information. You tell someone something. You can say, "She told me it was fine," but you can never ever just say, "She told it was fine." Tell must have a receiver. And there's a really similar trap right here. Ask versus tell. Ask is always a question or a request, whereas tell is always delivering information. You literally cannot tell a question. But advanced learners constantly mix this up. They'll say things like, "She told me if I wanted coffee." Nope, that's wrong. You're seeking information, so it has to be, "She asked me if I wanted coffee." You've got to separate the delivery of info from the seeking of it.
Now let's contrast hear versus listen. Hearing happens whether you want it to or not, right? It's completely automatic. A car honks, you hear it. But listening is a deliberate choice. You are actively deciding to pay attention. If you want someone to focus on what you're saying, you don't say, "Hear me," you say, "Listen to me."
Let's see this in action in Part 4, The Real Conversation. This is Sarah and Daniel's 200-word story.
So, set the scene. Sarah is calling her friend Daniel to tell him she just made a massive, life-altering choice. She says, "I am leaving my job. I gave them my answer this morning." Notice how there are no complicated advanced vocabulary words here at all. But these incredibly simple, basic words carry the massive emotional weight of a huge life decision. You feel the impact immediately.
And the stakes here? Absolutely massive. Sarah has been at this job for 4 years, constantly telling herself it would eventually get better. Well, it didn't. She has just 6 months of savings in the bank. And her brave new plan? She wants to build a service for people moving to a new country, to help them deal with the real things, not just the boring paperwork. She is taking a terrifying leap into entrepreneurship.
As she explains the whole situation to Daniel, she talks about how her manager surprisingly supported her and actually told her she should go. She says to Daniel, "That was hard to hear, actually." See that? Remember our earlier trap? Sarah drops "actually" right at the end of the sentence to show her own genuine surprise. She fully expected her boss to try and talk her out of it.
Then we get this super powerful moment. "Daniel, listen, I would rather try and fail than spend another year wondering." Notice that deliberate use of listen right at the start. She isn't just making sounds for him to passively hear. She is demanding his active attention because she really needs his support right now. And the word rather signals that this isn't just a casual preference. It's a powerful, deeply thought-out choice.
Finally, Part 5, How to Shadow Effectively, bridging that tricky gap between thinking and speaking. So, the absolutely crucial point of this whole explainer is, how do we bridge the gap between knowing these words in our head and actually speaking them in real time? How do we train this 200-word mastery? We do it through a technique called shadowing. Step 1, you just listen to a conversation to get the context. But Step 2 is where the magic happens. You shadow the speakers at full speed without stopping. You speak out loud right along with them. Step 3 is vital. You must match their emotion and their pace. Do not wait for pauses. And most importantly, if you stumble or make a mistake, do not stop. Keep pushing forward. You are training your mouth muscles to move at the speed of natural conversation.
Because this right here is our ultimate goal. Fluency is words coming out before your brain has even finished thinking about them. It is muscle memory overriding your hesitation. When you master these core 200 building blocks and actually train your mouth to form them quickly, you bypass that freezing panic entirely.
Which brings us to my final question for you. Are you ready to speak your first 200 words out loud right now? Don't just sit there comfortably reading and listening anymore. Take these fundamental words, find a conversation to shadow, and break through that speaking barrier today. The words are already in your head. Now it's time to finally let them out. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.